Her eyes locked on mine through the thick fog of Highway 70. A rickety cabin in the woods. A voice as cold as ice. I waited so long. The porcelain doll wasn't there a second ago. Now, it's watching me. Welcome to the Nightmare Stories. This is where the truth is more disturbing than fiction. We narrate the most chilling true encounters, personal memoirs, and the nightmares you can't escape. Join our community of the sleepless. Like, share, and subscribe to ensure you never miss a descent into the dark. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let's begin. It was supposed to be a quiet week. My last week home before heading back to college. A week of home-cooked meals, sleeping in my old bed, and pretending for just a little longer that I wasn't about to dive back into the chaos of exams and deadlines. The house felt familiar in that deeply comforting way it always does. The creak of the third step on the staircase, the way the kitchen light flickers once before it decides to stay on, the smell of old wood and my mother's lavender candles mixing into something I can only call home. But houses have a way of reminding you that familiarity is not the same as safety. It started on a Tuesday night. I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. Rhythmic, almost deliberate, like knuckles against hollow wood, but coming from somewhere below me beneath the floor, beneath the house itself. I set my phone down and stared at the ceiling, listening. The sound continued for a few seconds, then stopped. I told myself it was nothing. Old houses breathe, right? Pipes expand and contract. Wood settles under the pressure of temperature change. I'd lived in this house for most of my life and heard 1,000 unexplainable sounds. I rolled over, closed my eyes, convinced myself it was nothing. But the next night, it came back. Louder this time, not just tapping, scraping, like something heavy being dragged across concrete. A slow, deliberate pull. The sound moved too. It traveled from beneath the living room toward the back of the house, beneath the porch. I sat up in bed with the lights still off, ears straining, heart doing that thing where it beats just a little too hard and you become suddenly uncomfortably aware of your own chest. Scrape, drag, pause, scrape. My younger brother Marcus was in the room next to mine. I crept into the hallway and knocked softly. Marcus? He cracked the door open, eyes half closed. What? You hear that? He blinked, listening. For a moment, the house was silent, the kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath. Then, tap, tap, tap. His eyes went wide. What the? Is that under the floor? Yeah, I said. It's been doing it since last night. We stood there in the hallway like two idiots, barefoot in the dark, listening to something beneath our own house. Marcus tried to laugh it off. Probably a raccoon or something, but his voice had gone a little tight at the edges, the way it does when he's trying not to show something is bothering him. I knew that voice. I'd known it my whole life. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I went outside and crouched beside the crawl space vent beneath the back porch. It's one of those latticed wooden panels painted white. My dad had used that crawl space for storage years ago, old garden hoses, paint cans, things that were too worn to keep and too sentimental to throw away. I pulled the panel aside, clicked on my phone flashlight, and leaned in. Empty, or almost empty. The paint cans were still there, tilted and forgotten. A rusted watering can, cobwebs thick enough to look structural, but the dirt floor had been disturbed. You could see at areas where the soil had been pressed down in patterns, like something had been moved or dragged. I told myself it was old. I told myself the raccoon theory deserved more credit. I replaced the panel, went back inside, ate breakfast, tried to read. The words wouldn't stick. That afternoon, I walked next door to ask our neighbor, Mr. Hensley, a man who'd lived beside us for nearly 30 years and knew this neighborhood better than anyone, whether he'd noticed anything strange. He was on his porch, as he usually was, drinking something from a thermos. Strange? He repeated the word slowly, like he was tasting it. How do you mean? Sounds, mostly. At night. Coming from beneath the house. He looked at me for a long moment over the rim of his thermos. You know, a few nights ago, I want to say Thursday, I thought I saw someone in your backyard, around the side of the house, but it was late, and I figured it was one of you kids. A cold weight dropped into my stomach. What time? Maybe 2 in the morning. Maybe later. Just a shape, really. moving low near the porch, gone before I could really look at it. I thanked him, went back inside, stood in the kitchen with my hands on the counter and breathed for a moment. Someone had been in our backyard at 2 a.m. That evening, I decided to go around the outside of the house more carefully, really look this time, not just glance. Marcus came with me. We worked our way around the porch, slowly, pulling at old lattice panels, moving stacked wood, pushing aside the construction materials from a renovation project. Boards, bags of cement, hard as stone now, an old tarp folded into a rectangle, and then Marcus stopped. "Hey, come here." I moved to where he was crouching, behind a long stack of lumber that leaned against the far side of the porch. And there, behind all of it hidden, deliberately concealed, was a door. Not a crawl space panel, a real door, wooden frame, metal handle, dark with age, set into the ground at a slight angle, like a cellar door, though far less visible, far less expected. My parents had owned this house for 22 years. They had never mentioned a basement, because as far as they knew, there wasn't one. My hands felt strange as I reached down and pulled it open. The hinges didn't squeal, they moved too smoothly, which somehow felt worse, like they'd been used recently, like someone had oiled them. Concrete steps descended into darkness. The smell that came up was immediate and thick, damp earth, and something sour underneath it, like old food left sealed in a warm place. My flashlight beam cut through the dark and landed on food containers, dozens of them, stacked against the wall in a rough pyramid. Canned goods with their labels peeled, empty plastic bottles, a folded blanket in the corner, gray with use, a candle stub melted to a plate, and the walls, oh God, the walls. Scratch marks, deep horizontal gouges across the concrete blocks, in clusters the kind you make when you're counting days. And between them, drawings. Dark markings in what looked like charcoal or something thicker, jagged, angular figures. Symbols I didn't recognize and didn't want to. Circles within circles. Lines radiating outward like broken suns. An eye drawn over and over on 3 different sections of wall, each one slightly larger than the last. I don't know how long I stood on those steps, staring. Time went strange and elastic, the way it does when your brain is trying to process something it genuinely cannot categorize. This wasn't an animal. This wasn't pipes or wood or my imagination. Someone had been living here, beneath our house, beneath our floors. While we slept above them, while we ate dinner and argued about the remote and lived our ordinary, unsuspecting lives, someone had been down there, counting days on concrete walls, drawing on the darkness, listening to us the way we'd been listening to them. Marcus grabbed my arm from behind me. I hadn't even realized he was shaking. We closed the door. We went inside, and I called the police. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. They were professional, calm in the way that people are when they've seen too much to be easily rattled. They went down with proper flashlights and came back up with serious faces. One of them, Officer Reyes, spoke carefully, choosing words the way you do when you want to inform someone without frightening them too much. "Someone's been here for a while," she said. "The space has been modified. There's a ventilation gap in the back wall that connects to the outside. Whoever it was, they had airflow. They had food. They were settled in." "How long?" I asked. She glanced at her partner. "Weeks. Maybe longer." My mother sat at the kitchen table, with both hands wrapped around a coffee mug she hadn't touched. My father stood near the window, arms crossed, looking outside at nothing. Marcus kept standing up and sitting back down like he couldn't decide what to do with his body. The officers searched the yard. They found nothing. No one. They filed a report, gave us a case number, and told us to call immediately if anything else happened. They told us to be careful. They told us to lock our doors, as if the locks on our doors were the part that had failed us. That night, I secured the storm door with a padlock, a heavy one, the kind you use on storage units. I threaded the hasp through the handle twice, tested it. It held. I went to bed around midnight, lay in the dark, listening. The house was still. For almost an hour, nothing. I started to feel the tight wire in my chest slowly, carefully loosen, and then it started. Bang, bang, bang. Not tapping, not scraping. Fists or something like them slamming against the storm door from below. Furious, frustrated, The sound of something that had returned and found its door locked for the first time and was not willing to accept that quietly. I was out of bed before I knew I was moving, down the hall. I grabbed Marcus, who was already awake. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. And then, through the window movement, a figure. Dark clothes, low and fast, cutting across the backyard toward the fence line. Not stumbling, not panicking, running with purpose, like someone who knew the yard, like someone who had memorized it in the dark, over many nights from many angles. They cleared the fence in one motion and disappeared into the shadows of the alley beyond. The banging stopped. The house was silent again. I left for college 4 days later. I hugged my parents longer than usual and didn't explain why. Marcus walked me to my car and we stood there for an awkward moment before he said, "Don't worry about it, it's over." I nodded. Said, "Yeah, probably." But I still think about the walls, the scratch marks, the way those days were tallied in careful rows as if each one mattered, as if someone down there in the dark was holding on to something, for something in a way I still don't fully understand. I think about the eye, drawn 3 times, each one larger. I think about what it means to live beneath someone's life without them ever knowing you're there. And I think about that figure, not panicked, not random, running with purpose into the dark, like they'd be back. The shutter clicked. I looked at the photograph. The timestamp was from tomorrow. I haven't even stepped outside yet. So who was that? Standing right behind me in the reflection. There's a lingering coldness in the house now. Something. Unresolved. And just when you think it couldn't get worse, the line goes dead. But that wasn't the only story hidden in these files. The next folder was stained with something dark. Typewritten notes from a detective who vanished in 1974. He was chasing a sound, a frequency that shouldn't exist. And once you hear it, you can never unhear it. I've lived near the Montana-Idaho border my whole life. If you've never been to that part of the country, let me try to paint it for you. It's the kind of place where the mountains don't just surround you, they define you. Where the sky in August turns a particular shade of blue that doesn't exist anywhere else on Earth. Deep and clean and so wide it makes you feel both free and very, very small. The roads out here are long and quiet. You can drive for 20 minutes without passing another car, and that silence doesn't feel lonely, it feels earned. Nothing much happens here. That's not a complaint. That's just the truth of it. People are born, grow up, take over their family's land, or leave for the city. And the mountains stay exactly as they were. Seasons turn. The river runs high in spring and low by September. Elk move through the valley in October. Life has a rhythm here that most people never find, and I used to think that rhythm was permanent. Until one August morning, when everything I thought I knew about this place quietly, irrevocably shifted. I was driving my usual route. A 2-lane state highway that cuts between stretches of pine forest and open meadow, the kind of road you stop really seeing after years of driving it. My truck's radio was on low. The morning air coming through the cracked window smelled like pine resin and cool dirt. And then I saw it. A car, pulled off on the shoulder, angled slightly toward the ditch as if it had coasted to a stop without much intention. A silver sedan, nothing remarkable about it. It sat completely still in a way that caught my eye despite myself. The way something catches your eye when it's just slightly wrong. No hazard lights blinking. No one standing beside it. No flat tire visible from the road. Just a car sideways to the world pointed at a ditch. I slowed down, looked, kept going. I told myself, someone ran out of gas. Someone got a ride into town and will be back for it this afternoon. These things happen. People from out of state don't always know how far it is between stations out here. I told myself a lot of things. Later that afternoon, same road, same direction, I came back past that spot. My foot eased off the gas before my brain had fully registered why. The car was still there. Same position. Same angle. But now the driver's door was wide open, pushed back fully on its hinge. The interior was visible in the afternoon light. A jacket on the passenger seat. What looked like a coffee cup in the holder. An ordinary life mid-sentence abandoned. I pulled over, got out. The gravel crunched under my boots and the air smelled different now, warmer, drier, with something underneath it I couldn't name. I stood a few feet from the car and looked at it the way you look at something when you're trying to decide whether you're about to make your day significantly more complicated. The key was in the ignition, just sitting there in the on position though the engine was off, like someone had turned it off in a hurry. I called the non-emergency line, described the location, the car, the open door. The dispatcher had the measured, professional calm of someone who had heard a lot of concerning things. "We'll send someone to check it out," she said. "Thank you for calling." I drove home, made dinner, watched the evening light go sideways across the ridge, but I couldn't stop seeing that open door. The next morning I called my neighbor, Dale. He's a retired firefighter who knew every inch of this county. He knew every inch of this county like the back of his hand. I told him about the car. He went quiet for a moment. "Police check it?" he asked. "They said they would." "I'm going to make some calls," he said. By mid-morning, something informal but serious had assembled itself at the trailhead. Sheriff's deputies, firefighters, neighbors. No one had organized this with any official authority. It had simply gathered, the way people in small places gather when something is wrong, out of shared responsibility. Garrett laid out the terrain on the hood of his truck with a topographic map. "The car's registered to a woman from out of state," he said. "She checked into the motel in Clearwater 3 nights ago and hasn't been seen since. Hasn't checked out. Room's untouched." The air around the group went very still. "We grit it," Dale said. "It wasn't a question. We went into the tree line. I've walked those woods my whole life. But that morning they felt like something else entirely. The pines were close together, blocking the sun into thin, pale shafts. The undergrowth was dense, late summer thick, tangled with deadfall and wild grass. Every step had to be deliberate. Every sound your boot made against the forest floor felt too loud. We called out her name at intervals. "Sarah." The word floated up into the canopy and disappeared without an echo. I was working my section with Dale when he stopped and held up one hand. I froze. "There," he said. Through the brush, maybe 40 yards ahead, something geometric interrupted the organic chaos of the forest. Right angles, a roofline, half consumed by vines, a structure. Small, maybe 10 by 12 feet, sitting low against the earth like it had been slowly sinking into it for years. I had driven that road 1,000 times. I had never seen this. The door was slightly ajar, just a few inches, darkness visible in the gap. I want to tell you I felt brave walking toward it. I didn't. I felt a specific kind of fear. The kind of fear that comes from wrongness from a situation your instincts have already processed and filed under "do not proceed while your legs keep moving anyway." Dale called it in on his radio. We waited. The forest was completely quiet in a way that forests are not usually completely quiet. We went to the door together. Garrett pushed it open with one hand, flashlight in the other. Inside, the air was thick and damp and closed the smell of a place that had been sealed. Mildew. Something sweet underneath. The floor was bare dirt packed hard, and against one wall, in the corner where the light didn't reach, someone had made a kind of nest. Water bottles. A dozen of them. Some empty, some still sealed. Food wrappers, energy bars, crackers. The kind of food you buy when you're planning to be somewhere without a kitchen. A folded thermal blanket. A flashlight, its battery dead. Signs of life, recent life. And then Garrett's flashlight moved to the far wall. The hole was small, maybe the diameter of a finger, clean-edged in the way that holes are clean-edged when something is passed through with force and velocity. It was at roughly chest height on a person of average build. The wood around it had no char, no splintering outward. Whatever had made it had gone in. "Is that?" I started. "Don't touch anything," Garrett said immediately. His voice had changed, flattened. We looked for a shell casing, got on hands and knees on that packed dirt floor, flashlight sweeping every inch. Nothing. We looked for blood. Nothing. No drag marks. No signs of struggle beyond the ordinary disarray of someone living rough. Just a hole in a wall, and a place where someone had been surviving. Within 20 minutes, more official vehicles had arrived than I had ever seen on that stretch of road. The scene was cordoned. We were thanked and moved back. Garrett caught my eye as I was walking back to my truck. The look he gave me wasn't reassuring. It was the look of someone who had more questions than answers. Weeks passed. The rhythms of the valley reasserted themselves. Harvest, the first cold nights, the elk moving through right on schedule. I didn't hear any news. Nothing appeared in the local paper. Nothing circulated through town. Silence. Absolute silence. One afternoon in late September, I went back. I don't know exactly what I was looking for, confirmation maybe. The solid reassurance of a physical object saying, yes, this happened. You were here, it was real. I walked that stretch of tree line for hours. I followed the terrain I remembered. I found the utility corridor. I found the deadfall, the dense undergrowth. The shack was gone. Not torn down, there was no debris, no foundation remnant, no cleared earth to suggest demolition. It was simply absent, as if the forest had exhaled and closed over the space it had occupied, like water closing over a stone. I stood in the spot and I turned slowly in a full circle. I felt, for the first time in my adult life, genuinely unmoored. Not frightened exactly, something quieter and more enduring than fear. The specific vertigo of a world that no longer confirms what you know to be true. Every August, when the mornings get that particular quality of light, long and gold and slightly melancholy, I think about that car on the shoulder, the door open, the key in the ignition. I think about those water bottles stacked against a wall. Someone surviving day by day in the dark. I think about the hole in the wall. Clean, precise, unanswered. And I think about what it means that the place itself disappeared. Whether it was removed by people with authority, or whether there are spaces in the world that exist only briefly, and then seal themselves closed again like they were never there. I don't have an answer. I've stopped expecting one, but I've never quite driven that road the same way since. I look at every shoulder, every tree line, every structure half hidden in overgrowth, because I know now what I didn't know then, that the quiet places are sometimes the places where everything does, and most of it you never hear about. Turn off the lights. Good night, for now. I still feel those eyes, not from the darkness outside, but from the reflection in the screen. They say if you hear your name whispered in an empty room, you're already too late. I haven't looked back since. You'd think that would be enough to leave anyone shaken. But some places, they don't just haunt you, they claim you. Some stories never truly end. The cabin sat miles from the nearest road, just the wind, and a silence so heavy it felt like a presence. I haven't seen another soul in 3 days, at least, not a living one. It's too quiet. The last night alone, every year, at the end of summer, I disappear for a few days. It's a tradition I built for myself years ago, a private ritual, the kind that belongs only to you. No itinerary, no signal, no one knowing exactly where I am. Just a pack on my back, a few days of food, and the particular silence that only exists miles from the nearest road. For me, solo camping had never been about adventure or survival skills or any of the things people imagine when you tell them you go out alone. It was simpler than that. It was about remembering what it felt like to exist without being reachable. To sit beside a fire and have nowhere else to be, and no one waiting on a response. For years, it was the best thing I did for myself all year. Last August was supposed to be no different. I'd been hiking since mid-morning, moving steadily away from the trailhead, away from the marked paths, into the kind of terrain that discourages casual visitors. The elevation climbed and then leveled into a high plateau forested with old-growth pine massive trunks, widely spaced, the ground beneath them carpeted in rust-colored needles that muffled every footstep into near silence. The air up there had that quality I'd been craving for months, cool and clean and faintly resinous. I found my clearing in the late afternoon. It was exactly what I'd been looking for, a natural break in the trees. A small creek ran along the eastern edge, maybe 10 feet wide and shallow enough to step across. Its sound a constant low murmur that I knew from experience would be the best thing to fall asleep to. No trail markings, no litter, just space, just quiet. I made camp efficiently, the way you do after years of practice, tent pitched, pack organized, fire laid but not yet lit. By the time the sun was dropping behind the ridge to the west, I had a small fire going and a meal heating, and I sat in my camp chair with my boots off and looked up at the emerging stars with the feeling of a person who has successfully shed something heavy. The first night was everything I needed it to be. The fire crackled and spat sparks upward into the dark. An owl called twice from somewhere in the pines and then went silent. The stars were extraordinary, the kind of sky you forget exists when you spend too much time near town lights. I stayed up later than I'd planned, just watching them, feeling the specific peace of being completely voluntarily alone. I should have paid more attention to how hard the forest was working to seem peaceful. It was after 10 when I first noticed it. I was banking the fire down for the night, adding one more piece of wood to keep coals through until morning, when something in my peripheral vision made me look up. A light, faint, yellowish, far back in the trees to the north. I stared at it. It swayed slightly, the natural movement of a handheld light, a flashlight or lantern carried by someone walking. It was moving slowly, in a general direction that was neither directly toward me nor directly away. I told myself, another hiker, a late arrival, setting up camp somewhere in that direction, completely plausible. People hike at night sometimes. I told myself all of this very quickly and very firmly, and then I cupped my hands and called out into the dark, "Hey, hello out there." The light froze, not slowed froze, instantly, completely stationary, the way a person stops when they've heard something that requires every part of their attention. The sway disappeared. The light simply hung there, fixed in the trees for 5 seconds, 10, then it went out, total darkness. I stood by my dying fire, and I listened to the forest go very, very quiet. Even the creek seemed to drop in volume, as if the world itself was holding its breath along with me. Then, from that direction crashing, branches breaking, undergrowth tearing, the heavy rapid sound of something large moving through the forest at speed, but not toward me, perpendicular, moving across my field of awareness rather than at it, a lateral sprint through the trees that cut from north to east in a wide arc. The sound peaked close enough to raise every hair on my arms, and then faded, and then was gone. And the forest was silent again, completely silent. Not even the owl. I stood there for a long time. Then I put out the fire entirely, went into my tent, zipped it to the top, and lay in the dark with my pulse in my ears, telling myself over and over that it had been an animal, a deer, a bear. Animals run away from people. That's what I told myself. Eventually, exhaustion beat adrenaline, and I slept. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. No gradual surfacing. One moment I was asleep, and the next I was completely awake. Every sense snapped to full alert by something I couldn't immediately name. That particular kind of waking that your body does when it has registered a threat before your conscious mind has caught up. I lay completely still in my sleeping bag, eyes open in the dark of the tent, and I listened. The creak, the faint movement of wind in the upper canopy, and then the particular quality of silence that is not absence of sound but suppression of it. The silence of something nearby that is also being very still, very deliberate, very patient. I turned my head, slowly, toward the tent wall. The moon had risen while I slept, enough light to create silhouettes, and there on the nylon wall of my tent, cast in pale gray shadow from outside a shape, the unmistakable outline of a person, standing, 15 feet away, maybe less, facing the tent, facing me, not moving, just standing there, in the middle of the night, miles from any road, in a clearing I had found by deviating from every marked trail, standing and watching. I don't want to tell you that I stayed calm, because that would be a lie. What I experienced in those next few seconds was a fear so total and so physical that it temporarily removed my ability to think in language. My body acted before my mind had formed a single coherent word. My hand found my switchblade in the front pocket of my sleeping bag where I always keep it, and it was open before I'd consciously decided to open it. I found my voice somehow. "Who's there? I see you. I know you're there. I'm armed." For one long second, nothing changed. The silhouette remained exactly as it was still, patient, watching, and then it moved. Not a retreat, not a startled step backward. It came at me directly, immediately, with a speed that the stillness of the moment before made even more shocking. And it made a sound. I don't have a clean way to describe this sound. It was high-pitched but not a scream, not in any way a human scream registers. It was uneven, layered, like the sound had been assembled wrong. It hit the tent. The zipper tore not opened, tore, and there was a weight, a physical presence, on top of me, and the cold night air and fingers, and I couldn't see. Clearly, I could only feel and react. Hands on my face, fingernails dragging across my left cheek, something sharp and immediate that I'd know later was 4 parallel scratches that would take 2 weeks to fully heal. I drove an elbow into what I thought was a torso. connected. There was a grunt that was more recognizably human than the sound that had come before it. I swung the hand holding the blade not in a stabbing motion but a dragging one, instinctive and desperate, and felt it catch something, and heard a scream. A real one. This time, high, ragged, genuine with pain. And then the weight was gone, crashing, running, into the trees back toward the north, fading quickly. The sound of someone who had decided completely and suddenly that this was over. I was sitting in the ruins of my tent, switchblade in one hand, the other pressed to my face. My whole body was shaking, not the controlled shiver of cold, but the deep, unmanageable tremor that comes when adrenaline has nowhere left to go. I could feel blood on my cheek, warm against the cold night air, thin lines, 4 of them. I waited, listened. For a very long time I just listened, unmoving, until the forest sounds returned, the creek, the wind, and eventually, distantly, the owl, and I was as certain as I could be that I was alone. Then I packed everything. In the dark, by feel with shaking hands, I packed my entire camp and I walked out through the night, by headlamp, not stopping, not slowing, and I reached my car in the gray light before dawn. I sat in the driver's seat with the doors locked, and I shook for a while longer. I filed a report with the ranger station, showed them the scratches on my face. They were thorough and professional, and told me they'd look into it. I never heard back in any meaningful way. The scratches healed. The specific physical terror of that night faded into something more like a vivid, unwelcome film reel that plays occasionally and without invitation. But the questions didn't heal. That part stays clear and sharp and unchanged no matter how much time passes. Who was he? Not an animal I know, what I felt, what I heard, what climbed through my tent. A person, a man, by the weight and the grunt of pain. But then who? Who is in the wilderness, miles from any trail, at 2 a.m. without a light? Who freezes when they're called to, then extinguishes themselves, then runs a wide arc through the trees rather than away? Who stands in the dark, outside a stranger's tent, and watches for long enough that the silence woke me from sleep? What was he waiting for? And how did he find me? A clearing I chose at random, off every marked trail, in a place I'd never been before. No one knew where I was. I'd told no one my exact location. I have no answers, only the questions, and the scratches that have faded to almost nothing now, and the memory of that sound, that terrible, assembled, almost human sound that I hear sometimes in that specific pitch of silence just before I fall asleep. I haven't gone solo camping since. I'm not sure I ever will again, because the thing that took the longest to come to terms with was the loss of something I'd always believed about wild places. That the wilderness, however dark, however remote, belonged to the natural order of things. That the danger out there was weather and terrain and the cold things that were impersonal, that had no intention. I don't believe that anymore. Sometimes, in the dark places, far from any road, something else is also there, and it already knows where you are. Good night. For now, turn off the lights. The nightmare stories. We've walked through 3 doors tonight, 3 lives shattered by things that shouldn't exist. You might think it's over now that the screen is dark. But fear doesn't just disappear when you close your eyes. It lingers in the cold draft under your door, in the shadow that moves when you aren't looking. We search for logic in the illogical, but some questions are better left unanswered. Because the truth isn't just out there, it's right behind you. If these stories chilled your blood, subscribe and join us in the dark. But remember, maybe the scariest part isn't what we saw, it's what might still be out there, watching. Turn off the lights and stay safe. Good night. For now,